When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: The Miracle. User: Den of Gen 1. Posted June 25, 1999.
By the time I was old enough to understand what the word meant, I was already sick of hearing it. Miracle. That's what they called me. Not my name, not that poor kid, just Miracle. Like I was a headline that learned how to walk and talk. They said it on the news, in the hospital, at church, everywhere my aunt dragged me afterward like I was proof that God still gave a shit. A plane goes down, everyone dies, except the little girl, the miracle. That was the version people liked. It made things feel neat. It made people feel better about flying and dying and letting their kids out of their sight. I learned early that if you nodded along, if you let adults cry into your hair and squeeze you too tight, they left you alone afterward. They didn't ask questions you didn't know how to answer. They didn't look at you like you were broken in some way they couldn't fix. So I just played my part. I was quiet, polite, and grateful. They never actually asked me what I remembered. When they did, the doctors were careful. Soft voices, clipboards. They asked about the sound, the fear, the moment of impact. They asked if I remembered screaming, if I remembered seeing anyone else alive. The first time I said there was a man, the room went still. He pulled me out, I said. I was 9. I had a busted leg and a mouth full of stitches. He was there the whole time. The doctor smiled the way people do when they're already writing a different story in their heads. He said shock does strange things. Trauma fills in blanks. He said it was common for children to invent protectors when they're afraid. Invent. They use that word a lot. So I stopped telling that part. But I remember him more clearly than anything else from that day. I don't remember the moment the plane hit the ground. I don't remember the screaming people always talk about. What I remember is waking up cold and wet, my face pressed into pine needles and mud, my ears ringing so bad it felt like the world was underwater. Everything smelled wrong. Fuel and metal and something burnt sweet that made my stomach turn. I couldn't move my leg. When I tried, pain flared so bright it made my vision go white, and that's when he stepped into my line of sight. He was standing there where the fuselage had split open, steam and smoke curling around him like breath in winter. He looked out of place in a way I couldn't explain at 9 years old. Not frantic, not panicked, just there. "Hey," he said, and his voice cut through the ringing like someone turning a dial. "Easy, you're okay." I believed him instantly, and that's the part that bothers me now. He knelt beside me and checked my arms, my ribs, my head. His hands were steady, warm. He told me what he was doing before he did it, like he knew I needed that. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around me, even though it was raining and cold and he didn't have another one. When I asked where everyone else was, he paused. "I know," he said, and that was all. He carried me away from the wreckage before it got dark, and I remember my face pressed into his shoulder, the smell of smoke and damp wool. I remember thinking he felt stronger than anyone I'd ever known, like holding on to him was the only thing keeping me from sliding off the world entirely. We stayed in the forest for 2 days. He made a shelter out of torn seat cushions and branches. He started a fire with a lighter he found in a pocket that didn't belong to him. He rationed food from the wreckage and made sure I ate before he did. At night, when the forest made sounds I didn't recognize, he kept his arm around me and hummed under his breath, low and constant. Once, I woke up and thought he was gone. I panicked so hard I couldn't breathe, and then he stepped out of the trees like he'd just been standing there the whole time, watching. "Wasn't going anywhere," he said. I asked him his name, and he told me. I said mine. He repeated it like he was memorizing it. I asked him why he wasn't hurt. He looked past me, out into the dark, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. "Some people get lucky," he said. Then, quieter, "Some people don't." When the rescuers came, everything fell apart. Hands grabbed me, voices shouted over each other. I screamed his name until my throat burned. I pointed, I begged them not to leave him there, and they told me there was no one else. No footprints, no shelter, no sign anyone had survived long enough to help me. The official report said I was found alone, pulled from the wreckage by first responders. That was the story that went on paper. That was the story that stuck. Eventually, even I learned how to tell it without flinching. Time does that. It sands things down, turns sharp memories into something you can carry without cutting yourself. I grew up, I moved, I built a life that had nothing to do with pine trees or rain-soaked mountains, and by the mid-90s, the crash was just something that came up when people ran out of small talk. "You're that girl, right?" they'd say. "A miracle." I'd smile and nod and change the subject. I had a daughter by then, a house with peeling paint and a yard I never quite kept up with. A husband who knew the broad strokes of the story and didn't push for more. I slept fine most nights. I didn't dream about the forest anymore. I thought I'd outgrown him. The knock at the door came on a weekday afternoon. Nothing special about it. I was folding laundry, half listening to the radio, thinking about what to make for dinner. And when I opened the door, my brain simply stopped. He stood on my porch like no time had passed at all. Same face, same eyes, same calm, steady presence that made the world feel briefly manageable. He looked exactly the way he had in the forest, not older, not tired, and not surprised to see me. For a second, I couldn't tell if I was awake. The air felt wrong, thin and buzzing like right before a storm. My knees weakened as he glanced past me into the house, taking in the evidence of 20 years I'd lived without him, and then he met my eyes again. He smiled just a little and said hello.
Subject, Into the Woods. User, RambleNman66. Posted, September 17, 1998.
I went into the woods because I had already ruined my life everywhere else, and that felt like the kind of truth the trees wouldn't argue with. I wasn't looking for peace or clarity or anything that could be sold as self-improvement later. I wanted distance. I wanted to be somewhere that didn't know my name or my history or the way I'd learned to quit things right before they finished breaking me. I told myself I was just going for a long walk, but I didn't bring enough food or light or sense for that to be true, and I knew it the moment I stepped off the road and felt the ground change under my boots. I grew up around woods like these, thick, working forests where nothing was decorative and everything had teeth if you handled it wrong. My father taught me how to move through them when I was a kid, how to keep your bearings, how to follow water downhill when you were turned around. He also taught me something else by example, that leaving was cleaner than staying once things got hard. He didn't vanish or die or spiral out. No, he just walked away one day and never came back, and the rest of us learned how to live around the absence like it was furniture we couldn't move. That's probably why I didn't tell anyone exactly where I was going that night. The trail thinned quickly, dissolving into something more like suggestion than path. Grass pushed up through old tire ruts. Fallen limbs forced detours that felt arbitrary. The light drained unevenly, caught in the canopy, leaving the ground in a half-dim state that made everything look the same distance away. My flashlight helped in theory, but in practice, it only made the darkness feel closer, like it was leaning in to see what I was doing. I kept walking longer than I should have, telling myself I'd turn around after the next bend and then the next one after that until the forest subtly rearranged itself around me. The trees grew closer together, thinner and paler, their trunks packed so tight I could barely see between them. The undergrowth vanished entirely, leaving the ground bare and hard, scraped clean in a way that didn't feel natural. When the quiet finally hit, it wasn't gentle. Sound didn't fade, it shut off. Birds stopped mid-call. Wind died without warning. Even my footsteps felt muted, like the earth was absorbing them before they could echo. I stopped moving, and everything else stopped with me. When I turned around, the way back didn't look erased, just unfamiliar, like someone had redrawn it using the same materials but different intentions. Landmarks I thought I'd passed were either gone or repeated too often to mean anything. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to force memory to line up with what I was seeing, and felt the first real surge of panic settle into my gut when it wouldn't. That's when I heard breathing. Not loud, not close, just present. Somewhere off to my left, matching my pace when I moved and stopping when I froze. I called out, immediately hating how small my voice sounded, how it didn't seem to travel at all. The breathing circled. I picked a direction and walked faster, then broke into a run when the space between breaths closed. Running was the worst decision I could have made. The ground dropped out from under me without warning, and I went down hard into a shallow ravine choked with dead branches and stone. I landed badly, my ankle folding in a way ankles aren't meant to fold, and screamed despite myself. The sound echoed once and then vanished, swallowed like everything else, and I lay there, gasping, clutching my leg, trying to convince myself I could still stand when footsteps joined the breathing above me, uneven, numerous, moving with purpose. I shined my flashlight upward and caught glimpses of movement between the trees. Shapes darting just out of focus. Something struck the trunk near my head with a dull crack, showering bark down onto my face. I tried to climb out and slipped, skinning my hands raw, and then fingers closed around my arm from above, yanking me upright. Another grip caught my shoulder. They were strong, controlled, not panicked or sloppy. I never got a clean look at what they belonged to. The light refused to settle on them, and when it did, all I saw were bare arms, scarred and filthy, hands calloused like they'd been gripping wood and bone their entire lives. They hauled me forward without speaking, dragging me deeper into the trees as the forest closed in around us. Branches tore at my clothes and skin, thorns opened my forearms and face. My injured ankle dragged uselessly, sending white-hot pain up my leg every time they lifted me. I begged, then screamed, then promised anything I could think of, but none of it slowed them down. They brought me into a clearing that felt wrong the instant I saw it. Small and deliberate, like it had been carved out rather than grown. The trees leaned inward, their branches woven together overhead, sealing the space off from what little light remained. At the center was a pit, wide and shallow. The earth inside packed hard and dark with old stains that hadn't washed away. Ringing it were effigies, crude constructions of sticks, bone, and torn clothing, lashed together with twine. Some had hair woven through them, some had teeth. All of them faced inward, toward me. The breathing came from the pit. Something rose up slowly, unfolding with joints that didn't follow any human logic, its shape shifting as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. It didn't rush, it didn't need to. The people holding me forced me to my knees at the edge, pressing down until my balance tipped forward. I fought then, harder than before, thrashing and screaming, and one of them struck me across the face with something heavy enough to explode my vision into white. Another grabbed my injured ankle and twisted. I felt something tear and screamed again, wet and animal. They shoved me into the pit. I hit the bottom wrong, folding badly, my head snapping back against the packed earth. The air left my lungs all at once, and I laid there stunned, staring up as the effigies watched without expression. The thing climbed down after me, and up close it stank of rot and old skin. It pressed its weight onto my chest, and I felt ribs bend beneath it. It didn't kill me quickly. It tore into me methodically, like it was learning how I was assembled. Teeth scraping bone, fingers digging into muscle. I screamed until my voice broke, and then kept screaming anyway, the sound tearing itself out of me while the figures above watched in silence. The pain eventually narrowed into something simpler. When I came back to myself, the pit was empty. Morning light filtered weakly through the canopy. The effigies were gone, and so were the people. What remained was blood in the dirt and pieces of me scattered like I'd been pulled apart and badly put back together. I crawled out of the pit and kept crawling, leaving a trail behind me that even I couldn't ignore. It took hours to move any real distance, and when the woods finally opened up, it felt accidental, like I'd been expelled rather than allowed to leave. They found me just before noon. Searchers, dogs, voices that behaved the way voices are supposed to, and they asked what happened, and I told them I got lost.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.